Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Tuesday, and all of our guests, including Vince Mercogliano, standing by, are brought to you by our title sponsor, Able Auctions, ableauctions.ca. Vince covers the New York Rangers for the Athletic. Canucks and Rangers tonight. Rogers Arena, the return of J.T. Miller. Vince Mercogliano joins us now. He covers the Rangers for the Athletic. Vince, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
Doing well. How are you guys? Long night last night with that World Series, but I think I'm recovering.
Absolutely. Some people left that game early, whether they were at the stadium or watching it on television, like the people I work with. But Vince, enough of that. What's going on with this New York Rangers hockey club? I think the word disappointing comes to mind.
Yeah, that for sure is true. It's been an interesting start from this perspective. Obviously, with the new coach, Mike Sullivan, coming in, I think a lot of us were curious about how quickly he would be able to have an impact on a team that, as we know, you mentioned the word disappointing. They were very disappointing last season. And even though they weren't winning a ton of games early in the season, a lot of people, I think, who were observing felt pretty good about the way that they were playing. Last season, the Rangers were one of the worst defensive teams in the league. That might have been their biggest weakness on a team that, quite frankly, had a lot of flaws. And what we saw early on was that the Rangers were playing a much more disciplined, structured game. And a lot of the analytics backed that up. I mean, the Rangers still, I was actually just at a story for The Athletic yesterday that looks at a lot of the early season trends and stats. They rank, according to Natural Stat Trick, as the team that's allowing the fewest high danger scoring chances per 60 minutes so far this season. So you could point to some of that, as the Rangers have done, and say, look, even though the wins aren't coming, the process seems to be there. But I think what we've seen increasingly in recent games is that defensive coverage has been slipping, especially against, some bottom feeding teams. They just lost to the Calgary Flames the other night. Prior to that, they lost to the San Jose Sharks at the Garden. They still do not have a win at Madison Square Garden so far this season, which is definitely a sore spot for the team right now. And all along through these defensive ups and downs, what we've also seen is a team that offensively is really, really struggling. And, I've been covering this team for 7 seasons. To me, the makeup of this team, the skill from the top of the roster to the bottom of the roster might be the lowest or the least that I've seen in my time covering the team. They're a little top heavy. They've got a few guys like Mika Zibanejad, JT Miller, who I'm sure we're going to talk about, yes, and Artemi Panarin, who you expected to produce points, haven't quite been at the level that they typically are so far this season. But after that, there's really not a lot of guys that are proven point producers for this lineup. And I think you're seeing it in these struggles that they're having to consistently put goals on the board. So there are definitely, I think, some concerns, even at this early juncture, 10 games into the season.
And we'll get to JT Miller in a second, but Mike Sullivan has a bit of a history here in Vancouver. Is he getting much of the blame?
No, I think the honeymoon period is kind of still, underway. As I mentioned, the defensive improvements have been notable, and this is a team that did not have the reputation for having a lot of strong defensive players. And I think that the buy-in that Mike Sullivan was able to get from them early in the season was impressive to me. And his messaging has been really consistent. I mean, he wants them to be a puck pursuit team. He's used that phrase multiple times. He wants a forecheck that has more teeth to it, which I think we've seen for stretches, encouraging stretches so far from the Rangers in the defensive zone. They've looked much better as far as protecting those high danger areas. They've shifted from a man-on-man scheme that they were playing under Peter Laviolette last year to a zone system under Sullivan, and it seems to be better suited for this group of personnel. So I think there have been some really positive developments as far as Sullivan is concerned. What I think is becoming more of a question is the roster construction. Does this team have enough talent top to bottom, especially enough skill top to bottom, to be able to produce and do more than these kind of 2-1 games? And recently they've been more lopsided than that, because as you saw the other night in Calgary, they gave up 5 goals because, as we touched on, the defensive play has taken a little bit of a step back. I think the tendency now is they're starting to cheat for offense a little bit. They've been committed to defense for the first 7 or 8 games, and the goals weren't coming. So now you're seeing them start to take more risks in the name of creating some offense, and that's leaving them vulnerable on the back end. So that seems like kind of a bad recipe as well. But I think right now the fans are more pointing at, honestly, Chris Jury and the roster construction than they are at Mike Sullivan at this point.
Vince, it's going to be an emotional night for JT. Did a lot of good things in this city. Didn't end well. Did you get a chance to talk to him about this game? I mean, he's the captain too, so he's got to keep those emotions in check. But what are you expecting from JT tonight? It's going to be a game that's he's probably had marked on his calendar for quite some time.
Yeah, so him and I have had conversations about Vancouver. Actually, when he first came over in the trade last season, I remember having a lengthy conversation with him where he expressed a lot of gratitude for what happened to him in Vancouver. And as you guys know, he kind of transformed his career. He had been bounced around. I know his first run with the Rangers, there were people that felt like there were some immaturity issues at the time. He goes to Tampa, doesn't really work out there, lands in Vancouver, and really turns his whole career around and becomes not only an 100-point guy, but a guy that people felt like would drive the bus as far as his intensity and the way that he plays the game. And I know the Rangers coveted him because they feel like they want to become, the phrase they always use, is a harder team to play against, and they feel like JT Miller encapsulates that. So he feels like his time in Vancouver allowed him to sort of figure out the way to harness his intensity in the right way and become a better all-around player, which happened, but then obviously we see the way that things fall out. He's been pretty open about the fact that I remember the way he said it to me is he has emotional regulation issues. And I think when things are going well, you know, that intensity is a real positive for him. But I think when things don't go well, you can kind of see it easily go the other way. Now, the Rangers are gambling. I mean, they are banking on him being able to lead this team. Obviously, they make him the captain less than a year after he arrived, and they're kind of putting all their eggs in the basket of they want the whole team to embody that intensity that he plays with. And so far, I think, you know, as far as the lead up to Vancouver in the last few days, he's been so hyper-focused on wanting to keep it on the task at hand because the Rangers have been losing that he hasn't really talked a whole lot about the Canucks in the last few days, at least. I assume, I'm heading to the morning skate shortly, I assume that will be a big topic of conversation today, especially with the Vancouver media back around. So I'm very curious to see what's going to come out of that. But in prior conversations, when the Canucks come up, he doesn't really want to get into the drama or anything like that. He's mostly just expressed gratitude and considers this a place that he kind of reinvented himself, and obviously his career took off for the most part while he was here.
Vince, when the Canucks made the trade for Hedl, we had you on the air, and we talked about his concussion history, and sadly he got hit by Tom Wilson a couple weeks ago, and he's out right now. Boy, oh boy, I think you told us 4 or 5 concussions in New York. He's had 2 now in Vancouver. You got to feel for the guy, Vince.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, obviously I wasn't watching the game live, but I did see that hit shortly thereafter. You know, we can debate about the timing of the hit and all that. You know, to me, it's just always in these situations, and this was the concern, as we talked about last time, that was always kind of hovering over him in New York, is that every time he takes a hit, and I've seen him take some hits that don't necessarily look like big hits. Sometimes it looks like he's just grazed, but there seems to be this susceptibility, this vulnerability to when he takes contact, that fear is always going to be there. He has this history of concussions, as we've documented, and you know, now you just got to wonder about the long-term health for the guy. I haven't talked to him in a while. I know when he was in New York, every time this topic came up, he was adamant that he was going to play, that he had not even thought about whether he needed to step back and reconsider his future in the league. I don't know if that has changed. Again, I haven't spoken to him in a while now, but it's really a sad situation because you guys have seen it. When he's on, he flies. I mean, he's a really talented player, but it just seems so difficult for him to maintain it and most importantly, stay on the ice. And I know that was the fear that the Rangers had, and that was one of the reasons I think they were motivated to move him, is because they felt like it was a little bit of a ticking time bomb, unfortunately.
And one more on JT Miller. You touched on this, but what's he been like to deal with for you and the rest of the media?
He's intense. I mean, you guys know that. I've had some really interesting conversations with him. Like, I found him to be really candid. I think the mood of the day is kind of important. Like, certain practice days when I've had an opportunity to sit and chat with him, I found him to be really insightful. I did a story a few weeks ago. Him and Vincent Trocheck from the Rangers both came up through the Pittsburgh youth hockey system, and he lit up when I wanted to talk to him about that. Their experiences coming up were really, really fascinating. They had a team that I think at first only had 10 players on it. 4 of them ended up playing in the NHL, a U12 team. So that was pretty crazy when we had that conversation. So I found him at times to be really engaging, but you can see it. I mean, after a loss, he is steaming. I think he's been really good, I will say, as far as the quotes that he's giving us after some of these games. There's been a few times where he's clearly not happy. I mean, I think he's never happy after a loss, but there's been a few times where he's let his team have it. You know, he talked after that San Jose loss that he said they didn't respect their opponent, is the phrase that he used, which I think made everybody's eyebrows go up a little bit. So he's not afraid to call out his team. I think from a reporter's perspective, you appreciate that kind of candor. But I've also seen times, I think he had laid into them a few games in a row. That loss the other night after in Calgary, I think he was trying to be a little more calculated. I wrote about that after the game. I think he had a couple games in a row where he laid into his team and he felt like maybe I need to not be so harsh with my criticism tonight. And so he said things like, I don't want to make this bigger than it is and that sort of thing. But it's obvious this guy absolutely hates to lose. So if the losses continue to pile up, I do wonder, what direction is this going to go? Is he going to be able to control those emotions, or will there be times where maybe it gets the better of him? I know that's something he's talked pretty openly about. But yeah, I mean, listen, he's definitely an interesting personality. Like he's a character to have in the room, that is for sure. The Rangers are going through this sort of transition, this experimental period, I think, where the leadership group in the past was not nearly as in your face as JT Miller is. So Chris Drury has kind of handed him the keys, and now he is the one policing that dressing room. And I think it's going to be an interesting experiment moving forward. But as far as our dealings with him so far, again, I found him to be really candid. And from a reporter's perspective, you appreciate that.
Vince, enjoy Vancouver. Thanks for this.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.